Well, welcome back, everybody, here to Bayou Sports Talk on OD 640 KTIB. This is your host, William Taylor, and with us on the phone today, as part of our exciting continuing series that look back at the Saints of the 1960s, a gentleman who some people recognize as the first MVP, helping the Saints out with their first win by scoring 3 touchdowns, and of course, that's Mr. Walter Flea Roberts. How are you doing today, Flea?
Hey, I'm really great, thanks.
All righty. Well, I tell you what, how are things out there? You're out in California?
Yeah, out in Northern Cal, near San Francisco 49er territory.
Uh-oh. Well, they're not in the division anymore. It's here in the old media guide that you were actually born in beautiful Texarkana.
That's right, the Texas side.
And so I take it, did you grow up there most of your life?
No, I really didn't. Right after I was born, we moved to...
Did you play a lot of high school football before you got into college?
Oh, yeah. Matter of fact, I played football on the same team with Roy Jefferson of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Marvin Fleming with the Packers and the Dolphins. We're all on the same football team at Compton High School.
Wow, that sounds like quite a lot of talent you had.
Yeah, 3 out of 11. That's not bad.
That ain't too bad at all, to say the least. Now, from there, you attended San Jose State University.
Right.
And who was your head coach at the time?
Bob Tichnell. Actually, Bob was a former 49er player himself during the Frankie Albert days.
Of course, I remember the name Frankie Albert, left-handed quarterback, formed back in the 40s into the 50s.
Right.
And how, during the 4 years you were at San Jose State, help me out, at the time, what conference y'all were with?
Well, actually, at the time, we were kind of independent when I was there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we played teams like Stanford every year, University of Cal, Arizona State, Washington State, Oregon. We were a small school, but we played a big-time schedule.
You were named the most valuable player when you're at San Jose State.
Yeah, my senior year.
And, of course, you held school records in rushing, pass receiving, punt returns, and kickoff returns.
Also interception returns. I was a DB, too.
Well, you had to do it all.
That's right. Back in the day, we were real football players.
That's right. A lot of two-way, and you know, it is very much true. A lot of the young people today who may not realize it, that when rosters weren't as big on the college or pro level, I mean, two-way for most guys, probably through the early 60s, was pretty mandatory.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Yeah, that's true.
And then it says here in college, you scored on a 93-yard scrimmage run, 97-yard kickoff return, an 83-yard run with a screen pass, 74 yards on a punt return, and 67 yards with an intercepted pass.
That's right.
Boy, that's...
Well, there's more than that, but that's a good start.
And well, the media guide's only so many pages. If we put it all, it'd be like Gone with the Wind. And then...
Right, but I had my share of moments.
Now this is what I admire. It says here, in college, ran the 100-yard dash in track in 9.6 seconds.
Well, actually, I ran 9.4.
Wow.
Actually, see, I went to what San Jose State was known as Speed City.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just prior to Tommy Smith and John Carlo.
Right.
The time that I was there, they had people like Dennis Johnson, who was the fastest, he was a world record holder at that time, had the fastest times in the world in the 100 meters. And also Jimmy O'Magbemi, a Nigerian sprinter who was the only guy to beat Armin Harry, the German sprinter, who won the Olympics in 1960.
Wow.
The only guy to beat him, and I ran against those guys in track every day.
Boy, so you basically had the best of the best to go against.
I had a lot. I really did. I had a lot of help. But I was primarily, really a baseball player coming out of high school, really.
Oh, wow. Any, when you growing up, were there any particular ball players that you admired?
There, and the first baseman who stars, you probably remember this guy, he plays the rifleman on TV.
Chuck Connors.
Chuck Connors was the first baseman for the old Los Angeles Angels in the Pacific Coast League. And he used to leave the gate open on weekends sometime, and he allowed many of my buddies and I, we could sneak in the gate and get in the game.
Man.
Great guy.
Wow, Chuck Connors.
Yeah, Chuck Connors, boy, I remember him like yesterday.
Then,
I had a lot of heroes during that time. A lot of Mickey Mantle, Jackie Robinson, Frank Robinson.
Boy, is that... You bring out some great Hall of Famers there.
Right.
Now, to go on from there, you after your stint in college, you signed as a free agent in 1964 with the Cleveland Browns.
That's right.
And at the time, the gentleman who was their head coach, Blanton Collier. What were your first impressions when you met Coach Collier?
Well, you know, I didn't really know a lot about him, to be honest, because all I'd ever heard about was Paul Brown, who had just been relieved of his duties the year prior, 63.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know a lot about Blanton Collier, except that he was part of an assistant to Paul Brown, along with Howard Brinker and Fritz Heisler and guys like that who had been with Paul Brown throughout his career.
That's it.
I didn't know a lot about him.
Okay, it says here in the old guide that it was Blanton Collier that gave you the nickname the Flea.
Well, yeah, we were playing a game. Actually, the game was down in Los Angeles, the Coliseum, and I We were the champions.
And who did y'all defeat?
We beat the Baltimore Colts, who was the highest scoring team in the history of the NFL at that time, 27-0.
Boy.
They had Johnny Unitas and Gino Marchetti and Lenny Moore, etc., etc.
And I believe back then your quarterback was Frank Ryan.
Frank Ryan, that's right.
And of course, who I believe, if my old math is right, wasn't he a doctor in mathematics?
Yeah, he had a PhD. As a matter of fact, I think Frank had two PhDs, mathematics and also plastics or something else.
Wow.
Brilliant guy.
And I will say this, to be part of that team, your first year in the NFL, to go all the way to championship game, 14 regular season games, and into the championship, that must have been one heck of a rookie year.
Oh, that was great. I mean, that was like a dream come true. I grew up, sneaking in the Coliseum watching the Cleveland Browns play the Rams. So I remember guys like Marion Motley, Bob Gain, Otto Graham, all those old-timers, Dante Lavelli. So I grew up right there. Then later on watching Bobby Mitchell and Jimmy Brown. So, hey, that was like dream come true for me.
And then the next year, 65, go all the way to championship to take on the Green Bay Packers,
right.
A game which Green Bay won. But I talked to your friend Jim Garcia, your teammate as well,
yeah.
On that 65 squad.
I remember Jim.
And he had mentioned to me that I think the game was delayed, the start was delayed by about 30 minutes. I think wasn't like the buses late in getting there?
Well, yeah. See, we trained the time we got there in Appleton, Wisconsin, which is about 30 miles outside of Green Bay. And we gave ourselves about 2.5 hours to go 30 miles. The bus ran off the road twice.
I take it
off the road in the sleet and ice. They had to pull us back on the road.
Wow.
So we got there. We were a little pushed for time. It wasn't a good deal for us.
Yeah, because Jim had also told me that the other problem going into that game was that he felt that y'all seemed to be slipping a lot more than Green Bay, primarily because maybe the spikes on the shoes might not have been long enough.
That could have been. At the time, I tried to, I did put mine a little longer than normal because I was used to playing in the mud, to be honest. I didn't have too much of a problem with it. But I noticed a lot of our guys were slipping and sliding.
Now,
Green Bay, hey, they were used to playing in that kind of stuff, and didn't bother them at all. Didn't seem to.
There you go. Now, it goes on, the little guide here also goes on to talk about a lot of the players that you were with in Cleveland, and it states that when you were there that you and Leroy Kelly gave the Browns one of the NFL's most exciting punt return and kickoff return duos. And, of course, many fans out there will remember Leroy Kelly as the man who would succeed Jim Brown as the starting running back with Cleveland. Tell us about your memories of Leroy Kelly.
Well, it's funny. Leroy Kelly and I both were rookies, and Paul Warfield and Sidney Williams all at the same time. But Leroy Kelly was kind of put back there to run back kickoffs and punts with me. So initially, I don't think they thought Leroy could do too well in kickoff return. The first time we played the exhibition game, they instructed me to handle all the kickoffs. Said, Leroy, you just get up there and block. And I was thinking, they must be crazy. This guy's probably better than I am. But anyway, it took him a while to find that out. But Leroy he's a great friend. I'm in touch with him a lot. I know his son, David, and I know most of his family. But Leroy was a great football player, great punt return. I'd like to say this about that team. Between 64, 65, and 66, Leroy Kelly and I and the Browns, we led the league in total return yardage, kickoff, punts, everything.
Wow.
Years straight.
It's because it's interesting, too. One amazing fact a lot of the younger fans don't know is when Blanton Collier coached the Cleveland Browns as long as he did, to this day, he has the fourth highest winning percentage of all head coaches with at least 100 games under their belt.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Very successful head coach who, like I said, because, and I think it's kind of unfortunate the way the media is, that because he didn't win a Super Bowl,
right,
which everybody seems to want to remember,
yeah,
that prior to 65, when there wasn't a Super Bowl, the NFL didn't get near the media coverage.
That's true. It's very unfortunate because I'd like to say one thing about that. Hey, winning an NFL championship is much more difficult than winning a Super Bowl. If you don't win your division, you go home fishing.
That's right.
And I mean, there's no playoffs. There's no 8-8 mediocre teams playing in the playoffs. You either had a 10-4 record. We played 14 games at that time. If you didn't do well, you were gone. So it was the two best, and that means you had to play consistently throughout the whole year. So I think that, to me, as far as I'm concerned, I'm very proud of that accomplishment.
One person we better not forget in this interview, because he is probably, rightfully so, recognized as the greatest runner the game maybe ever had, and that's Jim Brown. Of course, you played with him for what would be his last 2 years in Cleveland.
That's true.
Was that a very big shock to hear that he decided to retire after 65?
Yeah, it was kind of a shock to me, but I remember sitting at a diner in Hiram College in Ohio during training camp, and he said, well, this might be my last year. He did kind of make reference to that. And I said, hey, come on, don't retire now. I said, hang around and pad your records. I said, all they're probably going to do is change the rules of the game one day. And he said, well, maybe so, but he said, hey, I got to go out like I came in. And he did.
Very true. And, of course, went on to a pretty darn good movie career and, active in a lot of social issues as well.
Oh, very active. I'm a good friend. I tell you, if Jim called me up today and said, go do blah, 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 I'd do it. He's a great friend. I had the greatest respect for Jim Brown.
Well, one thing I really thought Jim Brown had said on television one time, and it goes to show you the appreciation him and Blanton Collier had for each other. When Coach Collier took over the Browns, he created a concept a lot of the listeners may not be aware of called option blocking.
That's right.
And gave Jim Brown his choice of where he wanted to run when the play was called.
Oh, absolutely.
And Jim Brown said that it probably, on a per-year basis, he probably did better per carry in the years of Blanton Collier than he did under Paul Brown. And it was probably good that Blanton Collier appreciated that you and all the players, in a sense, should have a say in what was going on.
Well, I think that was probably a very unique thing at that time. Not many teams really utilized that concept. But we had some really great professional guys in Cleveland. I got to say that. Offense and defense. And when you look at that team, and you look at Bill Glass, and you look at Bernie Parrish, and you look at Vince Costello, Galen Fisk, Dick Modulewski, all of these guys, Jim Houston, they were true professionals, and they really treated the rookies like that. The minute we hit camp, they recognized the guys that they felt were going to be able to help them, and they treated us like pros from day one. It was probably the best situation that any player could come into the league with.
And, of course, you being a special teams player on punts and kickoffs returns, let's not forget one guy who truly was a hallmark when it came to special teams, and that's Lou Groza.
Oh, Lou Groza, good friend. I used to locker right next to him.
And,
Lou Groza.
and I'll say, and, of course, an era, once again, who not only played kicker, but was also an outstanding offensive tackle for many years.
He certainly was. And I tell you, when Lou kicked off, boy, he'd go down, he'd make that tackle. He's a big man.
Oh.
And he put that hit on you, boy, you've been tagged.
It's been pretty upsetting when the original Browns decided to move to Baltimore.
Oh, I tell you, I was talking, I got interviewed by somebody in Cleveland a few months ago talking about that same thing. I was walking along the beach here in the San Francisco Bay, and there was a number of kids that kind of know me in this area, so they came up to me and said, hey, did you hear that the Browns have moved to Baltimore? And I tell you, boy, that just knocked my socks off. I felt like the Browns were the Yankees. I mean, how you going to go play the Yankees and not play them in Yankee Stadium? How you going to play the Baltimore Colts and not play them in Baltimore? I mean, that's just how it's kind of like when the Dodgers moved from Brooklyn to L.A.
Right.
It killed me for a while.
Man.
But it's good to see the Browns are back and they have another team, and they're looking good right now.
Yeah, and hopefully, as the old saying goes, bigger and better things ahead.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, yeah. Hopefully they have a great year. I got to tell you one thing you probably don't know about me.
Mm-hmm.
When I came out of high school, I played baseball, and I ran track as a part-time.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a state champion in California in 1960, 24/7 and a half out of high school.
Wow.
I was undefeated for 2 years in a row in the long jump, and I never practiced.
And, of course, you think about how much talent has come out of the state of California. That's one heck of an honor.
Well, I like to think so. Another one of my roommates, teammates at that time, Eunice Williams, he still owns the interscholastic record in the 400 meters.
Wow.
So we had some pretty good talent coming out of Compton at that time.
Oh, very great. Then after your 1966 season with Cleveland, you get picked up in the expansion draft by the New Orleans Saints.
Right.
And, of course, back then the expansion draft was in the middle of February.
Yeah.
You come down. How did you find out New Orleans picked you up?
I tell you, strange. I was sitting in a foxhole in Fort Knox, Kentucky. This is about 10 below zero.
Wow.
Sergeant comes out there with a camera and a newspaper. He says, hey, did you know that the Browns just traded you? You just got picked up by the New Orleans Saints. That's how I found out.
Well, if you're at Fort Knox, they gave you any gold?
You know what? I couldn't even catch a nugget. I like to say it was a great experience, but it was a tough experience at the time because, as you know, the Vietnam War was very much underway.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was serious business there being in the Army at that time.
Very true.
Yeah.
Now, you come in 1967 with the Saints, and at the time, of course, the head coach was Tom Fears. What were your impressions when you first met Coach Fears?
Well, all I knew was that I used to sneak in the Coliseum to watch Tom play. He was a great receiver. Big guy, could run the good routes. I knew he was a former assistant from the Green Bay Packers with Vince Lombardi. I mean, I knew that. And
gentleman who owned the Saints at the time, who he was only 27 years old, bought the team for $8 million, John Meekum Jr. What was it like first meeting him?
John. That's what we called him. Hey, here's a guy, he's a big guy, 6'4", 210 pounds, big guy. He was very impressive. But, you know, he was a guy who was very enthusiastic. He just wanted to, contend. He wanted to give New Orleans a good team. I think they really had a at that time, I guess, the most successful, startup new team in the history of the league.
That's right. It was a record that stood. They had 3-11 that first year.
I think so, right.
And that stayed a record for an expansion team until the Carolina Panthers broke it in '95. You start off training camp out at Cal Western University in San Diego.
Right.
And I take it must have been a pretty nice setting out there.
Oh, beautiful, man. Sitting up on top of a hill overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It was so cool. And just minutes from downtown San Diego. So it was a very nice setting.
Now, like you said, great climate. And now I believe that year Garcia told me that when day one of camp first opened up, that he said, man, it seemed like there was 1 million guys trying to play there.
I agree with Jim. You know what? It was so many guys. People had a hard time getting reps. You know, when we would run certain drills, guys had a hard time getting one rep in. I mean, it was like a lot of people. He's probably right.
Now, some of the coaches on those early teams, the team you were with in '67, I believe the wide receivers coach, I believe, was also a former Ram. I just drew up Bob Shaw.
Yeah, Bob Shaw.
What were your impressions of him?
Well, you know, Bob was a receiver coach, and I didn't know a lot about him, but I thought we kind of fared very well considering a first-year team. We had a lot of new guys there, guys that no one really knew a lot about. Any of us really, like Jerry Simmons came from Pittsburgh. John Gilliam was a rookie, and so was Danny Abramowitz. Myself, coming over from Cleveland in the expansion draft. So Tom Hall from Minnesota, if I remember correctly. So I think they brought Dave Parson came in the next year, I think.
Right.
So there were a lot of guys who, they really they hadn't settled on anybody, really. So they were just trying to find out anybody had a good game, he's probably going to play the next game.
And, of course, also that first year they brought in the offensive coordinator, I believe, was George Dixon.
George Dixon.
So,
George is retired now. You know, he lives in Stockton, California.
oh, okay.
That's about 60 miles east of where I live.
And, of course, at one time, I believe he was a ball player for Notre Dame.
That's right. He's like he always said, hey, I was a legend there.
And
Yes, he was.
out there's a training camp in Cal Western, and then the preseason starts up. The first Saints preseason game that year was out in Anaheim against the Los Angeles Rams.
That's right.
Which would be, ironically, the only preseason game the Saints lost that year.
That's true. You know, we won every other game we actually won. Yeah, we played the Rams that day, and I had some old buddies that played with the Rams. Some of them live in Louisiana now. Henry Dyer played with the Rams at that time.
Oh, wow. You bring back some memories now.
Yeah, I talk to him every other day. We've been friends since 1965.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good to stay in touch.
Oh, yeah. Well, hey, that's what sports all about. It's all the friendship and all the camaraderie that you develop over the years.
Very true. Now, anyway, so the Saints, that first year, they go 5-1 in the preseason. Now, when training camp gets started, and this is a gentleman I definitely want you to talk about, there was a fellow they picked up in the expansion draft from San Francisco who, while he was with San Francisco, was a tailback and later converted to quarterback, who got into a car wreck, and a lot of people didn't think he could play football anymore. He comes to the Saints in that first camp, winds up being the starter on opening day, and, of course, we're talking about Billy Kilmer.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, Billy. When I was in high school in L.A., I used to go to the UCLA games, and he was an all-star tailback. Everybody in L.A. was trying to emulate Bill Kilmer.
Talking to Gary Quazzo a while back, who of course would end up starting about, I think it was 10 out of 14 games for you all that season. He said it was interesting. He gets traded. The Saints give up a #1 pick to get him to come from Baltimore to New Orleans,
right.
And it was very difficult being a pocket passer on an expansion team.
Oh, it was tough because he had no protection.
Exactly, and Billy Kilmer, being a former running back, he seemed almost perfect, a perfect mesh for those early teams.
Well, I think that's kind of ironic, and I think that's true because what happened, when you have an expansion team, you don't have all the pieces in place, and so you can't really expect the team to have that great offensive line to be able to protect that passer the way he normally should be. And so Bill Kilmer was a scrambler type, tailback type, so he kind of fared a lot better. They were always toying between
September 17th, 1967, the Saints get to open their regular season at home against the team you saw growing up as a kid, the LA Rams.
That's right.
And here's Tulane Stadium with over 83,000 people.
Hey, I love that stadium.
And the Saints win the toss. They elect to receive first, and I believe you go out along with that young rookie from South Carolina State named John Gilliam, getting ready for that opening kickoff.
Right.
Bruce Gossett of the Rams kicks off, and the ball ends up, even though it was close to you, Gilliam winds up catching it.
Oh, yeah.
And then all of a sudden he takes off, runs 94 yards for a touchdown. That must have been the loudest stadium you've ever been in.
Hey, 98 yards.
Okay.
98. I got to give him his 4 yards.
Oh, okay.
Hey, John ran that kickoff back. You know, I don't know if you remember. You see the film. You know, I don't know if he was even touched.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he made a couple of cuts, boom, boom, and he was gone. And I go, wow, I couldn't even get up fast enough to block for him. He was gone. I go, wow, what a way to start as a rookie.
and think about it, too. The first play in club history, this happens. That crowd goes crazy, and I'll bet you everybody in that stadium must have thought we were going to the Super Bowl if it was that.
I know they felt, yeah, we're going to be there.
The first 8 games, the Saints did not have a win, but the game at Dallas you mentioned was in the Cotton Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
Cold, rainy day,
Right.
and Dallas takes a lead, and then, and I'm just going by memory, Dallas was trying to run out the clock when Dan Reeves fumbles, and the Saints recover the fumble. And now the Saints have the ball back with under 2 minutes to go, and eventually the Saints hit some good passes at the right time and get all the way down to the 1 yard line, but except on that wet, cold day, Billy Kilmer missed the snap from Joe Wendrowski, fumbled the ball, and Dallas fell on it to run out the clock.
Yeah, I think Leroy Jordan fell on it.
And that was frustrating enough. And then one thing I have to ask you about, we've asked almost every player so far, back in, I think it was week 5 against the Giants, you lose a close game up there, but the excitement didn't happen until the game was over when they had the big fight with Stonebreaker and Greg Larson.
That's right. Yeah, all the fans came out of Yankee Stadium. I mean, yeah. That was really unreal. We should have won that ball game. We actually thought we had it. I think they came back late and won it 27-21 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But late in that game, we had it, and there was a little bit of a ruckus. I think Greg Larson was sitting on the sidelines, and Tom Hall was running out. He was kind of close to the sidelines, and rather than Greg Larson grab him, like do a gentleman thing, he kind of gave him an old elbow, an old shot to the chest. And so that didn't fit well with all our players, like Steve Stonebreaker, and even the owner, John Meekum Jr. He was down there on the bench with us.
And, of course, I think Jim Garcia said at one point Meekum was even trying to get in the fights with someone.
He was out there. I go, wow, I'm trying to get into the clubhouse, and he's out there swinging at people. I said, wow, that's really great. You got an owner go to bat for you.
The Saints hosted the Pittsburgh Steelers. Another close loss. I think Pittsburgh would score their winning touchdown with less than 2 minutes to go, 14-10.
Yeah.
But that was also the very first start for a 17th round draft pick out of Steubenville, Ohio, named Danny Abramowitz. Now, here in that one game, I think he caught 14 passes, and it was also the start of a streak where he had 105 straight games of at least one catch.
Well, hey, he was a guy that they didn't even bank on him being there. But all of a sudden, he caught a little fire. I mean, he had some sticky fingers, as you found out later in later years. But he made a lot of great catches. I mean, he had a great run, and he didn't have great speed.
And of course, it goes to show a lot of the young people listening, it's great if you can run fast, but if you can't catch the ball, it doesn't do you any good.
And that's really true, and he's a good example because if guys want to get any hope, he wasn't very big, but he was a fighter. I mean, Danny, they're born when they first were born in Ohio, they learned how to play football.
Very true.
So he's just a throwback to that. But he had a great career. I was very glad for him because he had some sticky fingers. Boy, he could catch that short pass. He ran a good route. He was a very good inspiration for any young kid trying to come up.
Well, finally, week 9 of the regular season, the Saints host the Philadelphia Eagles, the game which would be the Saints' first ever regular season win. And 7 weeks earlier, John Gilliam runs back the opening kickoff for a touchdown. And here you are. You received that opening kickoff. You run it back some 91 yards for a touchdown.
Hey, that was a great feeling.
And
the last guy in my wake was an old friend of mine, Nate Ramsey from the Eagles. We still talk. Well, for years we talked about that.
And
hey, man, I couldn't tell which way you were going. I said, well, you were supposed to know which way I was going. But that was a great feeling, yeah.
You scored a touchdown, and if I'm right, according to the film, you even threw your ball in the stand.
I threw 3 balls in the stands that day.
And that's right. You get 3 touchdowns.
That's right.
That one, and then later in the game, Jim Taylor fumbles. You pick it up in stride, run that back for a touchdown.
That's right.
And then near the end of the game, Gary Quazzo throws this big 50-plus yarder to you to break it open to make it 31-24.
Right.
And that must have been overwhelming. Finally got that first win.
Oh, man, to get that first win was just it's like a monkey off your back. I mean, we had played some tough ball games as we talked about, and they were close games, but we never seemed to be able to get over that hump. But this particular day, hey, it was our day.
Now, for the
great feeling.
And the rest of the year, in fact, we brought this out when you did Jim Inkster's show a few months ago, that you still to this day hold the Saints record for longest pass reception of 96 yards, which occurred 3 weeks later when you had the rematch with the Eagles up at Franklin Field. And I believe it was the last play of the first half where the Saints were at their own 2, and Billy Kilmer rolls left, hits you with the pass. You go down the left sideline, and I think somebody pushed you out at the other 2.
Wow.
Before you could...
To this day, I have a hard time remembering that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm getting Alzheimer's. I don't know. I hope not.
Season, the other 2 Saints wins, of course, was the last home game against Atlanta. Of course, on that, I believe, less than 2 minutes to go, Billy Kilmer helped lead the Saints on a 96-yard drive, ended up with a touchdown catch to Kent Kramer.
That's right. A great catch by Kent Kramer.
And, of course, that was the Saints' second win of the year.
Okay, coming back.
Crowd went crazy because, like you said, it was the last home game played towards the end of November. And then the last Saints win was the very last game of the year at Washington.
Against the Skins.
And about 35 degrees.
That's right, it was cold that day.
But the Redskins didn't have a prayer in that one.
No.
It was something like 37-17.
That's right. Well, we had a great game.
And, of course, Don McCall ran all over the place, and Danny and
Danny caught a pass for about 70, 80 yards, something like that, didn't he?
Oh, yes. It was a hands-down win. Now, one thing about the Saints, which is some of it is folklore, and I know some of it's true, is back then the city of New Orleans was basically in love with this team. Anybody who was a player or a coach seems like they were treated like king of the world. And,
oh, man, they were.
And the one gentleman who I thought really helped lead the charge for y'all, basically for the party atmosphere, was a gentleman who was a part owner, Al Hurt.
Al Hurt, he was a great guy.
And, of course, a well-established musician. I take it there were a few times y'all must have had some parties at his club.
Oh, yeah, we had a number of occasions that the whole team was there. No, he was very much part of that team. He traveled with us at times. That was great. He was a cool guy.
And
for being a great musician. I mean, he was really into football.
He, oh boy, I tell you what, he was just outstanding. A perfect mesh for a new team.
Oh yeah, when the Saints go marching in, oh, he was right there.
Now that first season, like I said, the Saints go 3-11, and like I said, I know there's just countless things, but the one thing we need to mention, which unfortunately has gotten lost in the world of Saints history, is that you, while you were with the Saints, had your own sports radio show.
Yeah, I did a radio show with WYLD. Yeah, the manager over there, real great guy, John Reversor. Still remember him. Yeah, they gave me an opportunity, and I did it pretty much, by tape. I would call it in sometimes, but it was a neat opportunity.
Was it primarily like to read sports?
Well, you know what they did? I can't remember if it was a 2 minute, 2.5 minutes. I can't remember, but it wasn't very long. But they let me kind of do my own thing. I mainly do interviews with guys.
Mm-hmm.
I would talk to various players who were coming in. If the Rams were coming in, I'd talk to somebody from the Rams. If the Eagles were coming in, and et cetera. So they kind of let me write my own script.
Very good.
I don't know if that was wise. But actually, I enjoyed it, though. It was a good show. Actually, I started to get a lot of fan mail from that show.
And then, unfortunately, you're only here a year, and I believe you said after you left, you had recommended Jim Hester and Jim Battle to take your place.
That's right.
So, how did you end up going from New Orleans to Washington?
Well, I didn't really want to. I was traded from the Saints for Carl Sweeten, the quarterback who came to New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in Detroit's camp for like 30 days. And, over there was Lem Barney and Mel Farr and those guys during that period of time. But I actually wound up setting out that year, 68. So when the year 69 came back, the Rams, I was living in L.A., which is really my home. I was getting ready to go downtown to sign a contract with the Rams. Jack Teal, the personnel manager, asked me, hey, we think you can play here. We'd like to see a local guy come and play for us. And I was on my way down
guess it was a wise move because you end up over there for 69 and 70.
Yeah, great time. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
And now, unfortunately, Coach Lombardi's tenure was very short because after his one season in 69, he came down with cancer.
That's right. That was the worst time.
And and now I believe you had told me a story a while back that didn't you and some of your teammates try to go to the hospital before he left us?
Yeah, that was just prior to before his passing away. There was a number of us who were members of the National Guard in Washington, D.C. So we would go to the Armory. Gary B-Ban, myself, Henry Dyer, a number of other players. Bob Long, who played for the Packers at that time. And so the sergeant one day said, hey, if you guys want to go over and take a long lunch and visit your coach, you can do that. So we went over to the Georgetown University, and we walk into the bottom of this room, the reception area, and there's Marie Lombardi, his wife. And she kisses all of us right on the lips. And she says, hey, you know, you can't really go see him because he wouldn't want you to see him like this. And then she said, she was very strong. She wasn't crying. She said, and we were going to have such a great season.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So that was very touching. I mean, and I guess a couple of days later he passed away.
Now, there's a gentleman who played with the Washington Redskins I want to mention because he's from Thibodaux, Louisiana originally, of course, where we're broadcasting from. Tom Roussel.
Tom Roussel. Hey, he was a good linebacker.
And, of course, played there from 67 to 70 before coming to the Saints.
That's right.
In 71. So it sounds like you got good memories of him.
Oh, yeah. Tom was a great ball player. He and Chris Hanberger and can't remember the other linebackers, but we had a pretty good team we were putting together there. I remember Tom very well.
And
very low-key guy. Hey, very professional, did his job. Yeah, real ball player.
After 1970, did you just retire or?
Well, actually, after 1970, that year, George Allen came in.
Mm-hmm.
That's when George Allen came in with over-the-hill game.
Right.
And so he made a lot of sweeping changes. I think that's when Bill Kilmer came to the Skins. As I was leaving, I was traded to the Denver Broncos.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember for whom or what, but I wasn't really that, wasn't that motivated, to be very honest. And so I went to that camp. I was only there for about maybe 30 days in the Denver camp. And so that was into my career in 1971.
Wow.
And I think some of my old Redskins buddies, Gary Beeben, was there trying out as a quarterback. He was a former Heisman Trophy winner who was a very good football player, by the way. He just never, some guys just never kind of mesh for whatever reason. But Gary Beeben, you can tell that he was a great football player. So I like to think he's a good friend of mine, but he told me, he said, hey, I had to give me one last shot. So he was probably a fourth string or something like that.
Well, one story you mentioned to me a while back, I definitely don't want to forget the show. Just to give a small example to all the listeners how times have changed, you did mention earlier about your term in military service. There was a point when you were with the Saints in 67 that didn't you have to miss some practice or game time because of your duties?
Well, I missed the game. They had a kind of a student protest at Grambling College, and they called out my unit. So I had to go up, right after that great game I had with the Eagles, I had to go up to Grambling and spend 6 days. And one of the colonels or one of our top officers came to me one day. I'd been there 3 days. He said, "Hey, listen, if we can get you a chance, would you like to go back and play this game against the Steelers?" I think it was. And he said, "We can't guarantee anything, but we'd like to. If we can do it, would you be interested?" Yeah, I'd love to. So they finally got permission for me to get on a plane. They hustled me into Tulane Stadium. They had an escort from the airport to Tulane Stadium. I got there. I got dressed. I went out and warmed up, and they came back in and they told me, "Hey, you got to get dressed. You got to get undressed. You got to get back on that plane." And that was a very touching time. And I don't know all the ramifications of the specifics, but I do know that they said, "Hey, the 67." They said, "Listen, we thought we could do this, but it's probably not going to fare well with the general public, and they're just not going to put us in a good light. So we're going to have to, pass on it." So they put me back on that. Got back in that cab or whatever car I was in, a staff car. Had another escort back to the airport. And they put me on a plane. I was back at Grambling College.
Wow.
So I missed. I really think that was a turning point in my career in New Orleans because I was really on a roll at that time. And after that, I missed that whole game. So it's kind of hard to get that momentum back.
Very true.
Get out of the mix, and so it kind of, it didn't help me at all, I don't think.
How long did you stay involved with the military?
Well, I was in the National Guard for 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
I did active duty in 66, part of 66, 67, and I was in until 1970. I got out in Manhattan Beach, California.
Wow.
Yeah, I did my last training down at
always like to ask this of all the former players that come on the show. What have you done since the end of your career?
Well, since that time, just work, raised 2 kids. I got a son. He's standing here now looking at me. And I have a daughter down in San Diego. They're both great kids. Didn't have a problem with them. I'm very proud of them.
Mm-hmm.
I work now as a direct salesperson with a number of companies, but one of the main companies is a computer technology company. They sell education materials.
Wow.
So that's what I'm doing right now, and kind of living up in the Northern California, not far from where I went to school in San Jose State.
Wow, that's pretty wonderful to hear. The one thing I wanted to ask is Wayne Mack, the former television reporter here in New Orleans, had made light of it often, but it's awful interesting that very first Saints regular season game in Tulane Stadium back in September 17, 1967, the pregame festivities had a couple hot air balloons.
I heard about that.
And what happened, one of the balloons crashed into a corner of the end zone where some people were sitting.
Okay.
And the one of the reporters turned to Wayne Mack and he said, I wonder if this is a foretelling of what's going to happen to this team. And for 20 years, they were right.
You're kidding.
That actually happened on opening day.
On opening day.
And it was just a fluke accident. Nobody got hurt. They thankfully shut the heat source off so they could fold the balloon up. And it actually happened on opening day. And the days at Tulane Stadium, and unfortunately the stadium was torn down a few years ago, but they, though it was a very old facility, I think without a doubt you can tell all the listeners that it had quite a good, shall we say, a lot of good old charm to play football.
Great. Hey, that was, to me, I may be an old-fashioned guy, but there's nothing like playing on a great field like Tulane Stadium on grass, not turf.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing like that. I wouldn't trade playing in Tulane Stadium or in Cleveland Stadium, the old stadium down by Lake Erie. These are grass fields.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care about the luxury boxes and all that stuff. I have no interest there at all. It's about the game on the field.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing like playing in Tulane Stadium. I love that stadium.
There's one guy I need to ask you about because I unfortunately I forget to bring him up but every time I do mention his name, the players laugh all the time. What on earth was it like to be on the offense with a guy like Joe Wendrahosky?
Wendy. Hey, he was a character. He was a character. But you know what? He was a steady guy. He really, I think he loved the game. I think most of them love the game, just to play the game. But it was really a treat playing with Wendrahosky because I remember him when he played with the Rams.
Mm-hmm. In fact,
Great guy.
of course, many people, and eventually we are going to get him to be on the show.
Oh, man, that's going to be a great one for you.
Well, I have to do it on tape because the way he curses, I don't want to put him on live.
Well, yeah, you're going to have to beat him every 10 seconds.
But one fairness, and a lot of the younger listeners probably don't know, and I know you'll remember this, that prior to 1978, offensive linemen could not lock out their arms to block oncoming defenders.
Oh, absolutely. That's when they if you get your arms out, they can call holding right now.
Exactly.
Now, a team has pretty much got the line of scrimmage every time the ball is snapped.
Mm-hmm.
And also, don't forget, you can't touch a receiver after 5 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you tell me a guy can't get free with those kind of rules.
A gentleman who definitely earned his weight in gold later was inducted in the Saints Hall of Fame, Jake Cupp.
Jake Cupp, good ball player. I remember Jake.
Of course, played in New Orleans for 9 years. And one thing is an interesting rule that's been lost as well or forgotten about. Jake Cupp was actually traded to the Falcons during the 67 season.
You know what? I'd forgotten that. I guess that is true.
And what had happened is an interesting rule. When the season ended, the Saints called the Atlanta Falcons saying that, all right, we want Jake Cupp back. And they said, well, no, you traded him to us. You can't have him back. And they said, look at the contract. It states that we only traded his rights for that season, not his future rights. So they had to call Pete Rozelle. Pete Rozelle reviewed the contract, and they told the Falcons, I'm afraid technically the Saints are correct. They only traded his rights for the one season.
Wow.
And what happened, the Saints did that because they realized we probably shouldn't have gotten rid of him.
Oh, no.
So what Pete Rozelle did, he told Atlanta, you have to give him back. But as a result of that trade, a new NFL policy was put into place that any time a player was traded, his future rights have to be automatically given up as well.
Oh, that's what started that, huh?
It was what I unofficially call the Jake Cupp decision.
Wow, I did not know that. That's very interesting.
And him and Wendrahosky, Dell Williams.
Dell Williams, offensive guard.
Of course, he was, who stayed with the team for the first 7 years in the league before establishing his own auto dealership in Slidell. Gentlemen, I know you probably have fond memories of Jim Taylor.
Oh yeah. Yeah, when I was in college as a freshman, I think I remember seeing Jim Taylor catch that pass over that circle route in the NFL championship game against the Eagles, and the old great Chuck Bednarik made the tackle, and because Jim Taylor was headed for that end zone.
That's true.
Yeah, I remember that very clearly.
And other backs the Saints had on that first team, Randy Schultz.
Randy was with me in Cleveland.
Well, that's right. I forgot about that.
Randy Schultz.
And Tom what's that?
Came from Iowa State, I believe.
Iowa State, that's right. And Tom Barrington.
Tom Barrington from Ohio State.
And one guy who I think was a character who later had a few bit parts in movies, Ernie Wheelwright.
Ernie Wheel, the big wheel.
Mm-hmm.
He was a good buddy of mine. His son and my son are close to the same age.
Mm-hmm.
The Wheel, the Wheel was kind of a bit actor for a good many years.
I know one guy that's gonna. You probably have a few stories on Big Doug Atkins.
Big Doug Atkins. You know what happened in training camp? You were talking about training camp, that first training camp.
Mm-hmm.
Doug Atkins used to walk around in the nude with his cowboy boots on and his cowboy hat.
What outside?
Inside the dorm.
Oh, inside the dorm.
And he had 2 guns.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So we had these rookies upstairs, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were playing this boombox, all that.
Yeah.
Music, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess Doug, I'd gone out somewhere and I came in. I didn't know what was going on. So I see Doug walking around in these cowboy boots and the nude.
Mm-hmm.
And he's pissed. And so they say, hey, man, Doug is really pissed. These guys upstairs making all this damn noise. So all of a sudden we hear, pop, pop, pop. So Doug shot up in the ceiling. I guess the rounds were live. I don't know. I do know it was quiet from then on.
Oh, I guess he got the point across.
I think he got his point across. Because, Doug was like, take no prisoners.
Not to forget a gentleman who stayed in New Orleans long after his career ended, Steve Stonebreaker.
Steve Stonebreaker. Hey, we were roommates at one time.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Steve Stonebreaker. Steve Stoney and I were I think the league came to us and asked us at the time. I don't think they had a lot of interracial rooming,
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, they asked me and Stoney would we mind rooming together. We said, hey, we don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it was like middle of the season, I guess. I can't recall really. But Stoney was, he had those tough knees, and that really hampered his career late in his career.
And a gentleman who I believe went to college in L.A., George Youngblood.
George Youngblood. Hey, believe it or not, George Youngblood he and I were in junior high school together.
Oh, wow.
Enterprise Junior High in Compton, California, along with the pitcher Doc Ellis.
Uh-huh.
We're all in junior high school together.
Boy.
With Roy Jefferson, who also played with the Steelers.
Mm-hmm.
We all went to the same junior high school.
Well, I tell you what, it goes to show you what the future can hold.
I tell you, boy, there's nothing like going back and looking at those great times. It was a great period of football. It was a great period for the NFL, and like the future years will be.
Hey,
thank you, and hey, listen, you guys, hats off to you guys and all the fans, because you guys really make this sport. And in terms of forget about all the money and all that stuff. The fans make this sport.
Of course, of the 1960s, we have a gentleman on the line who we're proud to have as our guest, and a gentleman who's in the NFL Hall of Fame for all the great years he was with the Green Bay Packers, a pretty darn good LSU player as well before coming to the Saints. Now, of course, Mr. Jim Taylor. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Doing fine. Delighted to be on your program here tonight.
Oh, very good. Now, before I had the opportunity, of course, to do this interview, I was doing some research, and one of the more interesting interviews I ever saw done with you was, of course, of a very outstanding gentleman. Of course, I'm referring to Mr. Gus Wow. And when you did Louisiana Legends, I found the most interesting part of the show goes back to when you were at LSU. He had made reference that, I believe it was Governor John McKithen felt that you were the greatest player he had ever seen in person at Tiger Stadium. And that, of course, Governor McKithen, for the younger listeners, was our governor from 64 to 72, who was, I believe, a Tiger season ticket holder going back